The date is June 21st, 2020. It's Father's Day today, and it's also the day that The Undertaker officially announced his retirement from the WWE. Now, a lot of people could maybe have predicted this ahead of time with the way this documentary series was presented, the timing, and in general, after the career he's had and the match with AJ Styles, there were a lot of signs to predict this, I suppose. And myself, I had called this in one of my earlier reviews of one of the chapters, and yeah, it came full circle today with this latest and last chapter 5 called The Revelation of the Undertakers Last Ride documentary series. So I'm going to run down the show here. I made some notes as I was watching, and we'll review it, and then I'll provide you with my thoughts on the whole series and Undertaker in general. You know, there's not enough words to really describe the career he's had, but you know, I'll try my best. So the show starts with the conclusion of the Extreme Rules match, and Taker basically recaps how well he thought the match had gone, and you know, how he thought that this was probably the best it could get at this stage of his career. And 2 months later, WWE having booked at Madison Square Garden for SmackDown, and it was where he cut that promo about you know, missing, or rather not having many more times possibly in front of the Madison Square Garden crowd, and he was right. I think that was officially his last appearance in front of a MSG crowd, and you know, backstage he was just discussing about moments at MSG for the likes of legends such as Muhammad Ali and Elvis, and you know, how that's very important to him, and the importance of a place like Madison Square Garden, you know, how much it holds highly in Undertaker. In his mind, you know, he holds it in great regard. And then he just credits the fans for getting him through his career, through all the injuries and all the ups and downs, how the fans have always carried him through, you know, this moment up to now and forever, in terms of the respect he's got, you know, from not only his peers, but the fans in general around the world. And he said that at this point, he'd be okay if he was never in the ring again. But then he says, when you receive a reaction like he did at Extreme Rules, you feel like you can always keep going. Stone Cold and Triple H provided input in terms of, you know, fighting that battle mentally about, you know, not wanting to leave, and, you know, that reaction you get, it's all what wrestling is about, the reaction from the fans. And then Taker just reflects on the Saudi Arabia disaster with Goldberg and how pretty much he nearly died. I mean, there's no second way around it. There's no second guessing. Look, Undertaker was inches away from landing fully on his head, and you know, disaster was averted on that occasion, and thankfully, you know, it didn't happen. But you know, it still holds close with him as how close that could have happened. You know, how close he was for that happening, and you know, he said how his wife could have been a widow, and you know, it's just really bad to think that, you know, it was that close from happening for Taker. But luckily things didn't go that way, and thankfully he was able to appear once again in the future. And the future meaning the next step after this was a Stone Cold podcast, so the Broken Skull sessions, and it was the first chance really Undertaker exposed that side of his, you know, personal life. You know, the first big time interview I can recall in terms of a WWE platform for him to share, you know, his personal thoughts on all sorts of different topics. I'd still recommend watching that, so if you haven't, please go and check that out whenever you get a chance. And yeah, that then moves on to AJ Styles, who was watching that show, and in so many words he understands that Taker wants to retire on his own terms. That's what he said, and he believes that he could be a part of that term. So Undertaker wanting to retire on those terms, AJ wants to be a part of that and wants to possibly have a match. So he skips going to Vince and goes directly to Taker and knows, look, if Taker doesn't want the match, then at least I know from Taker himself, and you know, that's basically the right thing to do, I think. So we called Taker, and at the time he said he got no plans to come back in the ring, but he would have loved to have worked with AJ Styles maybe 10 or 15 years ago. And then legends then cover how great AJ is, and a lot of them put over that he is the best wrestler on the planet today. You know, the likes of Stone Cold and Edge, Triple H, and even Michelle McCool, who was literally very high in the idea as AJ, you know, being the last opponent, there could not be anybody better than AJ Styles to do a match with Taker. Very safe in the ring, and all the positives that you would want from AJ and Undertaker in a match. And then at this point, then Taker now knows that he has to prepare for this match with AJ, so he goes to the Performance Center, and he's there anyway, providing some advice to the likes of Keith Lee, Dominik Dijakovic, Damian Priest, and then Randy Orton chimes in and says how Undertaker helped him at the start of his career, so it was a very, very pivotal piece of helping him get over in the initial stages of his career. And then he was then working with NXT talent Undertaker just to, understand whether it was the right decision for him now to get back in the ring. He needed to know, and that was his kind of test, getting into the ring and, seeing if his body would allow him to do what he wanted it to do. So that was completely fair enough. And he touches on Ric Flair, how after WrestleMania 18, the match that they had in Toronto, where Flair told him afterwards that he, thanks Undertaker for the match, and that he lost all confidence after WCW went into the ground out of business. And Undertaker says, well, he understands that now, about how that can happen to somebody. So look, it all comes full circle for him, I guess. But so Undertaker at this point now starts his normal WrestleMania routine, and there's the mini shoot, I'd like to call, from AJ on Raw, which was, really personal at Undertaker. That's the vibe they wanted to go with this, because they wanted, something other than a typical Undertaker feud, with the typical line of, either wanting to end a streak, which is now not possible, but also, just wanting to beat him. This was very personal, which was good. And Undertaker then, said that he wanted to incorporate a hybrid of all the three personas of the Undertaker. So you've got the American Badass, you've got classic Undertaker, and then you've got Mark Calloway. So that was a mix of the three. COVID-19 was covered here as well, and how they had to overcome the challenge of not being in front of a packed stadium, and then behind the scenes of the shoot for the match, the Boneyard match, 45 minutes away, which was the set for this, away from the Performance Center. And they got everything filmed. There was a bit of back and forth in terms of how they went back and discussed this. So Undertaker discussed about how he cut his arm, and they had to stop filming, and he hated about the fact that you had to stand around for long periods of time, which you can imagine would be annoying for anybody. And even though it was a cinematic match, it was still taxing on his body. He felt like he'd wrestled for 45 minutes at that point. So that was an interesting insight. And then this is where the Chapter 5 documentary really gets difficult, I suppose. You hear two pieces of shocking news. One from The Undertaker, which was the day before this match with AJ was filmed, he found out that his brother had unfortunately passed away. His niece actually called him. He was on the way back from the set of the Boneyard match, and then his niece called him. And he picked up, and she basically says, look, his brother's been involved in a car accident. So she talks about her father being involved in a motorbike accident or a car accident, but some sort of unfortunate accident. And, Undertaker says, well, the irony of the stipulation of this match, being around grave sites and all that sort of stuff, was really difficult, which you can imagine it would be. But then Undertaker got on with things, like a professional. And then the next part, which was the difficult news, was on the same weekend as this match was filmed. Once Michelle McCool said that they got back home, she found out that her nephew passed away. So these two really went through a tough few days, you can imagine, with all this WrestleMania pressure already, and then with the personal news that they got from their family members passing away. So you can only imagine how that would have affected somebody mentally. And then that plays into, I think, the ultimate decision for Undertaker as well. He also mentions Kobe Bryant, and then the impact that had, his passing obviously earlier this year. And he says he needs to feel, he feels the need, he needs to step away and enjoy the fruits of his labour. And who can blame him? I mean, the guy's been in the wrestling business for, 30 years now, and it's a perfect time for him to, finally walk away. Some may argue it should have happened earlier. Definitely, I probably would have said WrestleMania 28 after the end of the era match with Triple H. But look, it's all history now, but Undertaker feels now is the right time and enjoy the next chapter of his life, and he feels it's important to be there for those moments, with his kids and his family. And who can blame the man? I mean, with the way the world is at the moment, family is probably the most important thing, and spending that time with them is crucial. So 100% agree with Undertaker on that one there. And he says he never says never, which is the classic phrase in the wrestling business, but he doesn't have a desire to enter the ring again. I mean, he said as a joke, I think, about how Vince might need Undertaker in an emergency. But I think even Vince has to now respect Undertaker's wishes and, let the man be. And he thanks a lot of people. He said specifically people like Bryan Adams, Yokozuna, Mick Foley, Triple H, Bret Hart, Kane. There would have been a lot more as well. He said that it's just impossible. I mean, how many people would Undertaker need to thank over the span of his career? But those were a few of the names he mentioned, amongst many others. I think I've left out a few, but I got those in the notes there. And then his peers then reflect on him as a person and his in-ring career. So the likes of Kurt Angle and John Cena and Randy Orton and, all these guys he shared a ring with and, an experience with in the wrestling business. And it's absolutely incredible. And, Undertaker, therefore, now officially as poignant as the last shot of that Boneyard match was when he rode off into the sunset on his motorbike, he felt that was a strong way to leave, and it was a signalling, almost of the end. So it's a perfect way for him to end now in hindsight when you think about it. And he's gone, and that's it. I mean, who can begrudge the man for, wanting to call it a day now after spending time with his family? I don't think many wrestling fans will argue with this decision, but it is a massive day in the history of wrestling because of, one of the biggest and legendary characters of many people's childhoods now calling it a day. He's hung up the boots now. It looks as if it's official. And the whole series has been immense. It's been a brilliant insight into Taker, and at this point in his career he felt it was very necessary because he wasn't going to get this opportunity again to highlight this sort of stuff. He's not been able to do that in the past, the last 30 years of his career obviously, but now he felt it was the right time, and the timing seemed inevitable, with the Boneyard match happening, and now with the current situation in the world with no fans currently available, and who knows when they're back available to watch wrestling. I think he's probably looked at it and thought, well, you know what, I've got nothing left to prove anyway, and it's a time, he did mention this, it's a time for a new set of guys to step up and take that mantle. So he's done everything he could. So that's the wrap up for Undertaker's Last Ride documentary chapter 5, called The Revelation. And wow, what a revelation it was. Undertaker hangs up the boots, he officially retires from WWE, and a great legendary career of one of the all-time greats. All we need now is a great Hall of Fame induction, and I'm sure that speech will probably be the most anticipated in Hall of Fame history, because it's finally him being recognised on that stage in front of his peers, because he never appears at Hall of Fames obviously, so this is that moment for him to eventually get that platform, which will be great to see at some point, I'm sure, when the Hall of Fame is allowed to take place. Obviously, this year's Hall of Fame has been put on hold, so we've got to get that done, but that's just taught down the line. WWE will milk that for sure. So, Undertaker, definitely my top 5 of all time, and a credit to the wrestling business. So, please let me know what you thoughts of this whole Undertaker Last Ride series in the comments below. And your general opinion on Taker, probably a childhood wrestling hero for you guys, as he was for me. So, keep that all in the comments below. And thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again in the next video.